Hello, it is I, Dr. Brian Lorgon 111, and welcome back to Learning Command Blocks. This is going to be episode number 3, which means we've got 2 episodes behind us already, and I think actually it's the case that we're probably halfway to being able to do some really interesting things. I think by the end of episode 4, we'll actually have all the tools we need to really start building some interesting things. But as you may recall, in episode 1, we kind of did the basics of setting up the world and learning how to type in commands. In episode 2, we took a look at the 3 types of command blocks, the orange impulse blocks, the green chain blocks, and the purple repeater blocks. And in today's episode, we are going to learn the most important features of the Minecraft scoreboard. So let's go ahead and get started. The scoreboard in Minecraft is one of the most rich and complex subsystems of all of the command blocks. And I just want to focus on what I think is the most important aspect of the scoreboard system, which is objectives, players, and scores. Objectives are basically categories of different things that you want to track information about. Players are just kind of names of things that you want to assign individual score values. And then the scores themselves are going to be numbers that get assigned to an individual player in a particular objective. And that's kind of an abstract way of talking about things. And so let's make things a little bit more concrete with an example. I am going to say scoreboard objectives set display sidebar deaths to show off an objective, a hypothetical objective that I have just gone ahead and already populated with some data so that we can take a look. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, that is called the scoreboard sidebar. I have put up an objective called deaths, which has a list of players that you see over on the left, and each of them has a score value, which you see on the right. And so, once again, an objective is basically a category. Deaths, in this case, is the category. The players are just kind of names of people who could be names of people who are actually in your Minecraft world, or they could just be fake or hypothetical names that you're just making up. And then the scoreboard values are just integer values, just whole numbers that are assigned each player in a particular objective. So in this case, for example, Good has a score of 36 in the objective named Deaths. And just to show off a different example, I have another pre-populated scoreboard objective over here called Subscribers. And so here's just another hypothetical example where we have a number of different names of players who all have different score values in the objective of subscribers. And so Lorgon 111 has 16,650 as a score value in the objective subscribers. So hopefully that clarifies the 3 main things. Objectives are the categories, players are the names, and scores are the individual values that a player has per objective. So let me go ahead and clear off the objective that I have over here. I can just say scoreboard objectives set display sidebar and then nothing else. And that will clear the sidebar, so it disappears from the right-hand side of the screen. But let's talk about how we could make our own scoreboard objectives. And I've actually got a scoreboard command here inside this command block. Scoreboard objectives add will add a new scoreboard objective. And the scoreboard objective needs to have a name and a criteria. The name here is going to be my objective, MYOBJ, and the criteria here is going to be dummy. There's a bunch of different criteria because Minecraft can keep track of all kinds of scores on its own, like how many times you've died or how many monsters you've killed or different types of things. However, in general command block programming, rather than having Minecraft do the work of tracking things, it's usually the case that we want criteria where we are going to control everything and we're going to be the ones running commands to update the scores. And so there's a criteria called dummy, which basically just means it's a dummy objective that Minecraft doesn't care about. And it's all up to us programming the command blocks to actually control the values in this objective. And so you'll always see me using dummy objectives, but that's what that means. And so this will add a new objective called myObjective. That is a dummy objective. And so if I power this command block with redstone, added new objective, myObjective successfully. All right, so we've just created a new scoreboard objective. It's just that easy. You just give it a name. And if I want to set a value in this objective to a particular player, then I can use a command like this. Scoreboard players set, Lorgon 111, myObjective 2. This will basically give this player the score in this objective category. And so if I activate this command block, set score of my objective for player Lorgon 111 to 2, which is nice. It'd be even nicer if we could actually see that value up on the screen. And so we've already seen this command that I have typed into the chat. Scoreboard objectives set display sidebar. And if you give it the name of an objective, then it will put that objective in the sidebar. If there was some other objective, it'll just get replaced and now start displaying this new objective. And so if I run this command, my objective appears in the sidebar, and so we've got the name of the objective on top, and then a list of all the players and their scores. And since the only one we set up was Lorgon 111 with a score of 2, it appears as the only score on the right inside my objective in the sidebar. Stepping back to look at the big picture for a moment, I want to talk about why the scoreboard is so important. Back in episode 2, we learned about the 3 different types of command blocks that allowed us to run a series of command in sequence, that allowed us to do conditional if-then kinds of things, and that allowed us to run commands over and over in a loop. And if you've done programming in other programming languages, you may recognize those as the main types of control flow throughout a program: sequence, if-then branching, and loops. However, the one thing that was missing in the previous episode was data or variables. In your typical programming language, you're able to do things like say, let I equals 4 and I equals I plus 1, and if I is greater than 5, do something. And we needed that data, those variables, those things like I and j that you could set to different integer values in order to do a lot of computing, and the scoreboard basically gives us that. And so, for example, I can say scoreboard players set I in my objective to 4, and now I has the value of 4. And there's a number of different other operations you could do. I could say scoreboard players add I and my objective 1 to add 1 to the value of I in my objective. And so that'll increase I to 5 over there. And I could run that command again. It would increase it to 6. I could run that command again, increase it to 7. I don't know that I actually explicitly called it out, but you can use negative numbers as well. You can use any integers you want. So I could set I to be -10, and I becomes -10 over there. And by setting up a number of different variables or players in a particular objective, we basically gain access to ways to store temporary data inside our command block program, which is very important for being able to do complex things. Finally, one other command in terms of scoreboard players is reset, which will remove a player's score from the scoreboard in a particular objective. And so I can say reset I in my objective, and now I disappears from the scoreboard. It's kind of like deleting that particular variable. Next, let's show off a way that you can do conditionals using the scoreboard. There is a command called scoreboard players test, which basically tests if a particular player has a score in a particular objective that is between two numbers. So in this case, scoreboard players test Lorgon 111, my objective 1-4, will test and see if the score for this player is between, inclusive, the values 1 to 4. And so my objective, currently I have a score of 2. And so if I run this condition will turn out to be true. And so this conditional chain command block should say the score was in range. And so if I run it down in the chat, it prints out the score was in range. And if I were to, scoreboard players set my score and my objective to 4, 4 is still in range because it's inclusive. 1, 2, 3, or 4 would all make this test turn out to be true. But if I set it to 5, for example, then it doesn't print out the score was in range because this time it wasn't. And similarly, if it's a number that's too small, like -17, and I try to run this test, it won't succeed either. And so basically, this is a way that you can test if a particular scoreboard value is within a range of 2 different numbers. So now let's do something slightly more complicated. I have a bunch of command blocks here that are all set up so that they're in the state of needs redstone, rather than being always active to run, and that's so that I can just kind of talk about them individually and turn them on one by one while we're doing this. But the first one is going to do scoreboard players add tick my objective 1. We kind of saw this briefly in the previous episode, and I've got a repeating command block over here. And so if I activate this repeating command block, all of these will be activated, but only this one is going to run because it needs redstone, and that's the only one that actually has redstone. So if I activate this, the tick count on the right goes up and up and up, 20 times a second. It's going to have 1 added to its score, And so we just see its value going up and up and up while the game is running. So that is pretty straightforward, but there's a number of different scoreboard operations that we can do to kind of have multiple variables interact. And so one of the easiest ones is assignment. Scoreboard players operation, there's a variety of different operations. In this case, we're going to set up a temporary variable in myObjective, and we're going to set it equal to tick's value in myObjective. And so right now this one isn't running, but if I activate it by putting some redstone next to this block, now on the right-hand side, you can see temp is also going up just like tick is. So basically we add one to tick, and so tick gets the next number up. And then we assign whatever value tick currently has to temp. And so temp now also takes on that same value. And so that's an example of a scoreboard operation. And there's a variety of different scoreboard operations, including things like plus equals and minus equals, which would take one scoreboard value and add to it another scoreboard value or subtract from it another scoreboard value. Similarly with multiplication and division with the asterisk and a slash. And then finally, the one that I'm actually going to use here is percent equals, which is kind of modular division, which is basically when you do division and take a remainder. Now I have 20 in myObjective here, and so it's the case whenever you're trying to do scoreboard math with numbers, they actually have to be numbers with objectives, with scores in a particular objective. And so the way that I like to do arbitrary constants, like if I want to do something with a number 20 in a scoreboard operation, I will say scoreboard players set, and then I will spell out the name 20 in myObjective and give it the value of 20. And so now up on the scoreboard, we see that there is a name 20 that has a value 20. And so what we're going to do here is we are going to take whatever temp's value is, we're going to divide it by 20, but rather than just doing the division, we're just going to take the remainder. That's what the percent equal means. And so as a result, the result of this operation will always be a number between 0 and 19. That is, whatever temp's value is, modularly divided by 20, getting the remainder. And so if I activate this, it'll make more sense as we see it on the scoreboard. But now tick is continuing to count up and up and up on the right-hand side of the screen. You can see it's above 1600. Temp is also counting up and up, but each time it goes to 20, it ends up being reset down to 0. And so it's happening very fast, but basically it's going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and once it gets up to 19, the next number would get divided by 20 again, and so it gets reset to 0. And so temp is now resetting between 0 and 20 each time, and you'll recall that purple blocks activate 20 times a second. That's just how Minecraft command blocks run, at a speed of 20 times a second, which means now I can test if temp has a value in myObjective that's between 0 and 0, which is to say test if temp is exactly equal to 0. And so if I activate this, then every time temp cycles around to 0, and since it goes 20 times a second and temp is cycling around every 20, that means once a second, this condition is going to become true. And so now I'm going to say scoreboard players add seconds in myObjective, a new scoreboard player name. I'm going to add 1 to the seconds counter. Basically, each time temp cycles around to 0. And so if I activate this one, we'll see a criteria called seconds. And if you pay attention to it, you can see that it's increasing by 1 every second. Every time tick goes around 20 times, temp cycles back around to 0 that time, and whenever temp becomes 0, seconds increases by 1. And so if you look at the seconds counter, it's going 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. And basically we just built ourselves a 1-second timer using some scoreboard math. There are a variety of different scoreboard operations that are available. Just to try to quickly go through them, I've put them here in the chat. The general formula for writing out a scoreboard player's operation is to say scoreboard player's operation, some player name, some objective, an operation, some other player name, and some other objective. For the purposes of this, let's assume that we have X in objective O and Y in objective O as the two players and objectives. And here is a list of all of the available operations that you can do. And let me explain the meaning. Let's assume that X has a value of 11 and Y has a value of 4 for all of these. So plus equals means x takes on the value x plus y. So we'd add 11 and 4 and get 15 would be the final result for x. Or if we did minus equals, if x was 11 and y was 4, we'd do 11 minus 4 is 7 would be the new value of x. For times equals, if we had 11 and 4, we'd get 44 for the final value of x. For divided by equals and percent equals, you'll remember when you were first learning division in school, you could divide two integers and you would have a quotient and a remainder. So 11 divided by 4 has a quotient of 2 with a remainder of 3. Basically, 4 goes into 11 twice with 3 left over. And so divided by equals gives you the quotient. 11 divided by 4 is 2. And percent equals gives you the remainder. 11% equals 4 would give us a final value of 3 for x. Equals is just assignment. We saw this in one of the commands that I just looked inside the command block. And so if x starts out as a value of 11 and y takes on a value of 4, we then assign the value of y to the value of x. So x ends up with a final value of 4. Then there are min and max operations. And so if the values were 11 and 4, with the min, x takes on the minimum value, 4. With the max, x takes on the maximum value, 11. And finally, this little greater than, less than operation swaps two values. So if x was originally 11 and y was originally 4, then when we're done, y will have the value of 11 and x will have the value of 4. It'll swap those two. But these are the different scoreboard operations that allow us to do kind of all kinds of basic mathematical computations on the variables that we have stored as data in the scoreboard. So I think that covers the essentials of the scoreboard for today. Once again, to sum up, we have objectives, which are categories, we have players, which are these different names, and we have scores, which are the integer values that they take on, and we learned a variety of commands that allow us to manipulate players' scores in an objective, as well as do various math and conditional tests on those scoreboard values. The one final thing that we're going to have to learn a bit more about next time is entities, because entities are kind of the final piece of the puzzle for being able to do complex things, but when we can summon an armor stand and get it to do different things with the scoreboard and with commands, then we'll really be off and running in terms of being able to do a variety of interesting things in Minecraft. So look forward to that next time, but for now, I will say I hope that you guys are having a great day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye. But wait, there's more! As always, let's talk about some of the lies and omissions that I had from today's episode. The main lie that I know that I told was that when I was doing things like scoreboards, players, set Lorgon 111 my objective, let's set it back to 0, for example, I kind of suggested that a player name was either the name of an actual player in the world or otherwise some other fake name that you might give to something. But there are other types of things that we can do here. We've actually seen them briefly in other episodes. But for example, I could say @p to set a value to 1. And that's a player selector, which selects my player, Lorgon 111, and gives it a value of 1. But we can also even do things like @e to change all of the entities in the world to have a value of 1. And I didn't realize I had all of these entities in the world. There's an armor stand right here, but I'm not sure what all these other entities are. And so we ended up with a whole lot of things in the scoreboard that have these weird UUID values, a bunch of hexadecimal digits, sometimes separated by dashes, that all have a value of 1 here. But basically all the entities in the world, I just gave a value of 1. So in addition to names or players, you can also address basically, let me go ahead and do this. Kill @e type equals not player to kill all the entities. And then I'm just going to drop one piece of wool on the ground, and now it's an item entity. And if I run that same command again to set all the entities, objective score to 1, yeah, there we go. Then we only have one UUID in the scoreboard, which is basically the identifier for this individual piece of wool that is sitting on the ground. So basically items, or in general entities in the world, mobs, zombie could have a score. Basically any type of entity can also have a score in the scoreboard, and that's going to be very important in the future, but we'll see that next episode. And then finally, the other lies that I told were lies of omission. There's, as I mentioned at the beginning, a whole lot to the Minecraft scoreboard, and we only kind of scratched the surface of it. With a scoreboard, you can track all kinds of Minecraft objectives. I mentioned kill counts at the beginning, but you can track how many blocks a player has mined, or different achievements that they've gotten, or all kinds of Minecraft-specific things. In general, in this series, I'm going to focus on the general-purpose computation kinds of aspects of commands, as opposed to very Minecraft-specific commands, such as tracking how many blocks a particular player has mined. But occasionally, then, when we're trying to actually build interesting things, we'll use some of those commands as well. But then also the scoreboard also has a bunch of things related to teams and team colors and whether you can see invisible players on your team and friendly fire and all kinds of things like that. If you want to learn all about the scoreboard's different commands, I will include in the description of this video a link to the wiki page for the scoreboards, which tells you all about those details and all manner of gory details, so you can read about them. In any case, those are the lies that I know I told this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you again next episode, where we'll really be able to make some progress.